If you have already watched this introductory information, you can skip ahead no more than 15 minutes. Hello, welcome. I am predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of the famous music duo Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall to the ground on August 30th, 2025, and then die as a result of his injuries on September 4th, 2025. This time-stamped email proves that this prediction that Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025 has been known since November 9th. We can see here the timestamp November 9th, 2024. On November 8th, 2024, we received the relevant prophetic signs related to Paul Simon. And as I wrote right here, God was pointing to November 8th ahead of time because Simon's death will point to Revelation chapter 8, verse 1. And this is the reason why Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025. In short, the date 8:1 and 11:8 hint at Revelation 8:1 in the Bible, which describes a period of silence that was observed in heaven. Paul Simon's first hit was Sound of Silence. As I wrote right here, it is exactly 38 weeks between November 8th and August 1st, 2025, and Paul Simon is predicted to die at the age of 83, for which 38 weeks hints at. All right, the analysis that God was pointing to August 1st was 100% correct. However, Paul Simon did not die on August 1st. Instead, God provided clear and relevant signs related to Paul Simon, which revealed adding 34 days to reach September 4th. The prophetic sign we received on August 1st revealed adding 34 days to reach September 4th. There are countless other reasons for knowing that Paul Simon will die on September 4th, but the prophetic sign that we expected in advance of August 1st revealed adding 34 days to reach September 4th. The sign we received was the news report, the breaking of the news of the sale of the storied mansion in Los Angeles that was built for the most prolific TV producer in history, Aaron Spelling, and God uses extremes and records for his signs, who produced the longest-running drama series in history, Seventh Heaven. Paul Simon's most recent album is 7 Psalms, and his 7th solo album is the album Graceland, which is about a mansion. In his signs, God has been using this theme of mansions to relate to Paul Simon. This isn't the only example. For example, also, the sale of Paul Simon's mansion was a prophetic sign on July 1st, 2022. This sign right here is also the sale of a mansion. And like the sale of Simon's mansion, the price that it sold at was a prophetic sign. This sign here of Aaron Spelling's mansion sold for $110 million. Before I explain that, there is another connection that I forgot to mention between Paul Simon's Graceland Mansion album, his 7th album, and Aaron Spelling, who produced the TV series Seventh Heaven, which is that one of Simon's hit songs that was released from the Graceland album, The Boy in the Bubble, was inspired by Aaron Spelling's TV movie, The Boy in the Plastic Bubble. This mansion sold for $110 million. And this is because Paul Simon is 9/11 symbolism in God's signs. God uses firsts for prophetic signs in general. And Paul Simon opened with a performance in the first broadcast of Saturday Night Live after 9/11. Simon also performed at the 10th anniversary at the 9/11 Memorial. And Simon is known for being from New York City. That's why this mansion in this prophetic sign on August 1st, 2025, sold for $110 million. It sold for $110 million exactly 37 months after the sale of Paul Simon's mansion. 37 hints at 3 sets of 7. The Israelites were led by Joshua into the promised land and then enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security of ancient Jericho collapsed in God's judgment. Joshua died in the Bible at the age of 110. On 9/11, the Twin Towers were 110 stories before they collapsed, and then engendered a small earthquake that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street, where George Washington was inaugurated. And through the 9/11 events, God pointed to George Washington because Washington was inaugurated in Federal Hall and afterwards marched down Wall Street, as in the Israelites march around the walls of security of Jericho, into Trinity Chapel, today nicknamed the Miracle Chapel, because it was the only building that survived the falling debris at Ground Zero and survived without even a broken window, due to the 70-year-old sycamore tree that was uprooted in the process of sheltering the chapel. And today there is a 20-foot-high bronze statue of the roots of this tree to commemorate it for saving the chapel. And the reason why God pointed to this chapel that Washington went into is because inside the chapel, at the beginning, the founding of the nation, as in the foundation of Federal Hall being cracked, Washington consecrated the nation to God, saying that if the nation were to ever turn away from God, it would lose its divine protection and blessings, which it temporarily did on 9/11, when 2 planes struck the 2 towers 17 minutes apart, and the towers were again 110 stories high. 2 planes 17 minutes apart hints at 2 times 17 equals 34. On 9/11, the Dow Jones Index was closed at 9,605.51. The 9,605 hints at 9 and 6 plus 5 equals 11, and it was closed 0.34 points above the previous day's close. In other words, 34 is a 9/11 number. Paul Simon is symbolism in God's signs for 9/11. On 9/11, 110 stories collapsed, and we have this sale of this mansion that is connected to Paul Simon that sold for $110 million, 34 days before it is predicted that Paul Simon will slip and fall down, as in collapse of the towers, and then die as a result of his injuries on September 4th, 2025. It is predicted that on August 30th, Paul Simon will slip and fall, and then his injuries will lead to his death. And August 30th is 29 days after the sale of this mansion for $110 million, which, as I've now explained, hints at the 110 stories that collapsed on 9/11. And 29 is a number that God uses in order to hint at 9/11 through the use of only 2 numbers, 2 and 9, 29, which hints at 1 and 1 and 9, and therefore 9/11. One thing to add here is that Paul Simon is predicted to die as a result of falling, as a result of injuries incurred from slipping and falling. It is irrelevant the state of Paul Simon's health currently. That said, there is 0 news in the media regarding the state of Paul Simon's health. But like I said, it's irrelevant anyway, because Paul Simon is predicted to slip and fall and then die. Now, the reason for going into all of this is because it needs to be explained that in reality, or rather essentially, I predicted that Paul Simon would die on September 4th, back in November of 2024. Because again, as I explained here in this email that was written on November 9th, 2024, God was pointing to August 1st, 2025 for Paul Simon's death because of Revelation 8:1, as I explained. And I just now explained the trail of signs that led from August 1st to September 4th. And those signs were revealed through knowing August 1st ahead of time. Therefore, essentially, if you are reasonable and you have the eyes to see, I predicted that Paul Simon would die on September 4th, back in November of 2024. The reasonable person will recognize that this is true. I am predicting that on September 25th, 2025, a dirty bomb, a conventional bomb with nuclear material, will explode in New York City in Penn Station. And also a dirty bomb will explode in the port of Los Angeles. In his signs, God is clearly communicating that this event will happen. It's just a question of whether or not this will occur on September 25th. I am predicting that Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom will die in a plane crash in St. Louis as they are traveling from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles in Busch Stadium in St. Louis on August 2nd, 2028. This will be during the predicted presidential campaign of Gavin Newsom. As a result of Gavin Newsom's death, Michelle Obama will become the Democrat Party's presidential nomination. Michelle Obama will, quote unquote, win the election over J.D. Vance on November 7th, 2028, and will become the president on January 20th, 2029. Donald Trump is predicted to run as J.D. Vance's vice president. This scheme to overcome the 22nd Amendment will backfire and inspire Michelle Obama and Barack Obama to run on the ticket with Barack Obama as Michelle Obama's vice president. She will then step down and Barack Obama will become the president again. It is predicted that there will be a massive Mary apparition on the beach in Rio, Brazil on April 24th, 2029. It is now recognized that there will be 2 massive Mary apparitions on the beach in Rio. The first of the 2 is predicted to be on March 22nd, 2029. These predicted Mary apparitions will not be secretive. They will be mainstream, worldwide news. Like all Mary apparitions in history, including at Lourdes, Guadalupe, and Fatima, this Mary apparition will be a demon pretending to be Mary. It is predicted that on April 26th, 2029, the key will open the bottomless pit and fallen angels will cross over into the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the 5th trumpet judgment that is described in Revelation chapter 9, when the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to demons pretending to be aliens. The demons pretending to be aliens will claim to be here to help us with our nuclear weapons. It is predicted that Pope Francis will be resurrected from the grave on April 26th, 2029, and it is possible that on this day, Pope Francis will announce that aliens have arrived and have made him the ambassador for the world. This will immediately give Pope Francis, the Antichrist, supreme power over governments of the world. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to a zombie pandemic and the masses becoming demonically possessed that will be facilitated through the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist and 5G frequencies. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the coming genocide politicide in America. The resurrection rapture event will occur on Pentecost on May 27th, 2029. On September 11th, 2029, there will be a catastrophic asteroid hit of Earth in the Indian Ocean. The greatest seismic effect of this will be felt on the other side of the globe, which is North America, and this will trigger an eruption of Yellowstone volcano and will cause the volcano in the Canary Islands to collapse into the Atlantic Ocean and send a mega tsunami towards the East Coast. It will also trigger the collapse of the Hoover Dam, which will cause a water panic in California, and many other devastating earthquakes. The day of the Lord the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, Judgment Day, will be at the end of 2031. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, welcome. This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall on August 30th and then die on September 4th. As we can see here, this email was composed on August 18th. Okay, we can see right here as well, August 18th. This proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time. Also, the post date of the video you are watching on the social media platform that you are watching it on proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time. It is not possible to change a post date of a video. That said, the knowledge that God has been pointing to Paul Simon, and specifically the timing of his death for a major prophetic sign, has been known for years. And having said that, the majority of the insight regarding Paul Simon has actually come in the last month. There has been a lot of insight, don't get me wrong, before this last month, but it has all come together in the recent prophetic signs. This video will talk about one such example of a story God is telling through Paul Simon. And it is these stories that God is telling for the purpose of revealing extremely essential information and knowledge that everyone needs to know. And these stories are developed in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, through the prophetic signs' connections to other prophetic signs. In other words, the full intended meaning of any of God's prophetic signs cannot be fully or properly understood without their context and connections to the other prophetic signs. It is through these connections that God is able to reveal more information, and an isolated sign doesn't really work because it needs its context. And the stories and the themes that God is telling through prior revelations, through prior signs and connections. And so this is what's not appreciated fully by others that watch for prophetic signs. Is that, and this is also why the vast majority of the signs are missed, because of the non-appreciation of how the signs need their connections. It's the same with the Bible. There are people, scholars, even theologians that love to isolate passages to develop their heretical doctrines, but the Bible is in fact not a linear document, and it is not meant to be isolated with chapters and verses. In fact, the original Bible didn't have chapters and verses. The Bible is meant to be appreciated as a whole, and one can take an infinite number of pathways through the Bible as it is all interconnected. Well, it is likewise the case with God's prophetic signs. They need to be taken as a whole to be understood properly and not isolated. This is what's missed generally in the watching community. Well, anyway, and by the way, this is, for example, how the death of Paul Simon is known to be a prophetic sign. There is no one else talking about this. And that's because it's been revealed for years through God's big picture of signs. Okay, so, well, let's begin with this particular story that God is communicating here, which is very interesting. So the famous boxing trainer, Tommy Brooks, died on July 29th, 2025. This boxing trainer was known for training heavyweight champion Evander Holyfield, whose name in itself is interesting. He also trained Mike Tyson at one point. All right, before we begin, this video will talk about connections through God's signs regarding Paul Simon that lead to August 30th and this prediction that he will die on August 30th. However, more has come to light, and it is now recognized that first, Paul Simon will fall. He will slip and fall to the ground, which is incidentally why his hit song Slip Sliding Away, and then die 5 days later on September 4th. The point here is that August 30th will be talked about in this video as the date Paul Simon would die or will die, but it will not be the day, it is no longer predicted to be the date on which Paul Simon will die, but instead the date it is predicted that Paul Simon will fall to the ground. And this is so relevant regarding the subject of this video, which is about boxing. Paul Simon, of course, is the singer and composer of the big hit, The Boxer, which incidentally is from his 5th album. And Paul Simon is predicted to die 5 days after he slips and falls. And the point here is that boxing is about falling. The goal of the boxer is to knock the other boxer out and have him fall to the boxing ring mat. This particular video that you will watch here is truly profound. In fact, you could argue that it all comes together with this, because as I've been in production of the videos, as the prophetic signs keep coming throughout the month of August, for example, more insight, more profound revelation regarding, or understanding, if you will, regarding the significance of Paul Simon has come to light. So much more. It is amazing what was not known regarding Paul Simon prior to this month, which really couldn't have been known until the prophetic signs hinted at these things during this last month, during these last couple of weeks, in fact. This includes what I'll be explaining in this video, but like I'm saying, arguably this video is like a summary, a grand tying everything together, the grand sum of the symbolism for who Paul Simon is in God's signs. Let me explain. So, famous boxing trainer Tommy Brooks died on July 29th, 2025. He was known for training heavyweight champion Evander Holyfield, which is an interesting name in itself. He also trained Mike Tyson at one point. Tyson infamously bit off part of Holyfield's right ear during a fight, known as the bite fight. A bullet pierced Donald Trump's right ear, and it would be the same part of the ear that was bitten off by Mike Tyson, the cartilage in the upper ear. The bullet scraped part of the cartilage and fat from Trump's ear, and Mike Tyson bit off a chunk of cartilage off the top of Holyfield's right ear. Trump was involved in the boxing industry, and he promoted Mike Tyson fights in Atlantic City on the coast of the Atlantic Ocean. Donald J. Trump is equal to 888 in English gematria. The word Trump is equal to 88 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. Trump was born exactly 8 years before trainer Tommy Brooks was born. Tommy Brooks died on the day of the 8.8 earthquake in the Pacific Ocean, which ties back to the Mike Tyson fights promoted at the coast of the Atlantic Ocean. One of Simon and Garfunkel's major hit songs is The Boxer. Simon opened the first broadcast, and God uses firsts for prophetic signs in general. Simon opened the first broadcast of Saturday Night Live in New York City after 9/11 in 2001 with a performance of The Boxer. Simon's death during the 8th month of the year will point to the sound of silence at the beginning of Revelation chapter 8. Simon's first hit that launched his career was Sound of Silence. The sound of silence in heaven in Revelation chapter 8 is a warning that is followed by the trumpets of God's judgment. The song The Boxer is known for its use of a piccolo trumpet that breaks the song after the second verse. In archaic English, the word trump means trumpet, or the sounding of a trumpet, which is why trump is God's trumpet for prophetic signs. This is why boxing trainer Tommy Brooks was born exactly 8 years after Trump, which is equal to 88, was born. The boxing trainer died on the day of the 8.8 earthquake in the Pacific Ocean. The boxing trainer died 8% of a year, of a calendar year, before it is predicted that the singer of The Boxer, Paul Simon, will die on August 30th. All right, it is now believed that Paul Simon will die on September 4th, and the date August 30th is the date on which Paul Simon is predicted to fall to the ground, and as a result of his injuries will die the following day. Now this is relevant regarding boxing, because boxing is about falling down, a knockout. Part of boxing is attempting to knock the other player or boxer out and have him fall to the mat of the boxing ring. And so that's why God is using the boxer here and Paul Simon and the boxing trainer, I should say, to point to Paul Simon, the composer of The Boxer, and Paul Simon's fall on August 30th. From the death of the boxing trainer, it is also 4 weeks and 4 days before the predicted death of the composer and singer of The Boxer on August 30th. Simon and Garfunkel's fourth album was Bookends, and the album contains the song America, the hit song America. Simon's death will symbolize the bookend to the warning for America of God's judgment through the events of 9/11. Simon's death will symbolize how America's opportunity since 9/11 to repent and turn back to God has slidden away. Simon's hit song, Slip Slidin' Away, is from his fourth and last solo album with Columbia Records. God uses the name Columbia to symbolize America. This is the reason for the 4 weeks and 4 days connection from the death of the boxing trainer. Because of the fourth album, Bookends, and the fourth solo album, which contains the song which contains the song Slip Slidin' Away. This is why Simon performed The Boxer to open the first Saturday Night Live broadcast in New York City after 9/11, and why his death will be the bookend to God's warning of judgment for America. And that, my friends, is so extremely profound and important. His death will symbolize the coming conclusion to the opportunity, the window of time for America to repent and turn back to God. On 9/11, 2 planes struck the 2 towers 17 minutes apart. The flood judgment began on the date 2/17 in the book of Genesis. 2 times 17 is 34. The stock market's number on 9/11 was 0.34 points above its previous close. That's because Simon and Garfunkel's first album was Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. Wednesday is the 4th day of the week. This hinted at 3 and 4. And this is because of the Hebrew idiom in the Bible of the book of Amos for 3 transgressions and for 4. And Famous Amos, Wally Amos, the founder of Famous Amos Cookies, was the agent that first signed Simon and Garfunkel through luring them into his office with cookies. And he died at the age of 88 on the prophetic Hebrew calendar date last year. And this hinted at the book of Amos, chapter 8, which begins with a description of a basket of summer fruit, and baskets of summer fruit appear in the month of August, and Simon's death will hint at the beginning first verse of the Revelation chapter 8, the sound of silence in heaven. And so what I'm saying is that, again, Paul Simon is about 9/11. He first opened the broadcast symbolically after 9/11 with the Boxer, which is why the death of this trainer, the Boxer, which ties to Trump, in order to point to the trumpet judgments that come after the warning of the sound of silence in Revelation chapter 8, which will be pointed to through the death of Paul Simon, which makes Paul Simon's death a warning to the coming trumpet judgments of destruction for America, because America's opportunity has slidden away, and Paul Simon's death will be the bookend to that window of opportunity. A couple more details here. Tommy Brooks, this trainer, died at the age of 71, which hints at 7 + 1 = 8, which hints at Revelation chapter 8, as does the predicted death of Paul Simon point to Revelation chapter 8. Specifically, the beginning of the chapter, which describes a sound of silence in heaven, and Paul Simon's big hit that launched his career was Sound of Silence. Also, Brooks's death on the date 729 is interesting because it hints at 729, which is 9 times 9 times 9. And God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And the number 9 from the Bible symbolizes God's judgment. And so, in other words, again, Paul Simon's death will be the massive warning of judgment, as was the sound of silence in heaven, the warning before the trumpet judgments, which is why Trump is all a part of this through these boxing connections, because it's signaling that following Simon's death, who was the composer of the Boxer, we have the trumpet judgments that will be fulfilled that are described in the book of Revelation. And Trump was a part of the boxing community, and it all ties back to Simon and Trump through the connections that I've explained in this video. Again, Trump was involved with Mike Tyson and the fights on the Atlantic City, and Tyson bit the ear of Evander Holyfield exactly where Trump's ear was bitten, if you will, part of it removed, if you will. Trump is a part of the 9/11 signs. Trump famously called into Channel 9 News on 9/11 and inadvertently trumpeted how his tower on Wall Street had become the tallest tower in Lower Manhattan. When the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment, the Israelites had been led by Joshua, who died at the age of 110, which is why on 9/11, the towers that collapsed and engendered a small earthquake that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street, these towers were 110 stories high, and on and on. So Trump is a part of the 9/11 signs. Furthermore, Wall Street was named after the 9-foot-high wall of security that the Dutch built to keep the British and the Indians out. And Trump called into Channel 9 News, and this pairs with the 110 floors, which gives us a 9/11. But also, now we know that God is using Paul Simon for this same purpose of pointing to 9/11, because he performed at the first Saturday Night Live broadcast after 9/11, and he opened the broadcast with a performance of the song, The Boxer.